Great to meet everyone. My name's Tim Kessler. I'm our Director of Solutions Architecture at Redox. And today I'm going to be talking about building a data foundation for healthcare transformation in AWS with Redox. Now, as I'm sure you've all seen walking around HIMSS this year, there's a lot of discussion about AI. I want to preface this and just be clear, I'm not an expert in AI. That's not an area of focus of mine. But what I do focus on at Redox is real-time data exchange, transformation of that data, taking it from legacy data standards, HL7, X12, CCDs, translating it into a FHIR format and routing that into an environment where you can actually start building on. And the nice thing is, although I'm not an expert in AI, what is really important when it comes to talking about AI is building that foundational data layer that you can actually start to work with. So when we look at modernizing some of the infrastructure that exists within healthcare, what we see is everybody wants to have usable healthcare data in a cloud environment that they can actually start working with. But when you actually kick off one of those projects and start to build out some of the connectivity, this becomes an incredibly challenging prospect. You start hiring teams of HL7 experts, CDA experts, custom JSON-based API experts, and then realize that they also need to be FHIR experts as well in order to figure out how this data maps into an appropriate implementation guide to make use and drive value out of this. So this is where Redox looks to come in. And partnering with AWS, we're entirely built on AWS as well. So partnering with AWS, our focus is how can we activate this data that's sitting in 10, 20 different source systems on-premise at a healthcare organization, build the infrastructure to funnel and feed that data into your AWS environment in a FHIR format via a single point of connection, regardless of how many source systems we're integrating with, so that that data is going to be usable in the tools that you work with on a day-to-day basis within AWS. Now, the reason we're going to be talking a lot about FHIR today during this presentation is because FHIR has really been the standard that the healthcare industry has decided to consolidate around. So it's taken a few years. It's certainly had some hiccups, but we're now at a point now where there's a lot of great tools within cloud environments, such as HealthLake and other AWS products, that can leverage the FHIR data in that consistent format. But the problem is, well, FHIR APIs exist with a lot of EHRs to drive query flows. A lot of this data doesn't exist in a way where you can just set up a pipeline between your Epic instance or your Cerner instance into AWS and just start streaming that data in real time. There's still legacy interfaces that are really carrying the bulk of the integration work at healthcare organizations today. And it's a real pain to set up the translation layer and get that into a usable format. So with Redox, we bring that expertise as well as the infrastructure to start tapping into those HL7 feeds, CCD feeds, X12 feeds, translate that into a consistent FHIR format and route that into your AWS environment. So you're not having to stand up all of these disparate teams that don't necessarily have the right specialties or areas of focus to get this into a consistent format. Now, ultimately, cloud has been at the forefront of all our minds for a while now. Most healthcare organizations have some sort of cloud presence. Most payers have some sort of cloud presence that they're building on top of, even if a lot of the source systems still live and are implemented on-premise today. But when you start looking at that data that's being exchanged on a daily basis in real time, trying to route that into a cloud environment still carries a lot of weight and a lot of burden to it. In a quick study that we ran surveying a lot of our healthcare organization partners today, these implementations, unfortunately, tend to take anywhere from 6 months to 12 months to set up those interface feeds and route them into your cloud environment in that FHIR format. When you work with Redox, a typical implementation project here is going to be closer to 4 to 6 weeks total. So from project kickoff to production level go live, where you can start making meaningful API calls against your FHIR environment in the cloud, we're standing up this infrastructure in 4 to 6 weeks. On top of that, adding write-back component to start making sense of, start driving outcomes from this data and pushing it back into your EHR environment, that's another ecosystem where Redox has been doing this at scale for the last 7, 8 years and can start powering some of the end-to-end workflows. So you're not just routing this to a cloud environment where it sits, but you can actually start driving value from that by pushing it back into your EHR system, getting it in the hands of your clinicians, your operational users in the system that they work with, so they can actually start making sense of this data. So what does Redox actually look like? With Redox, built on AWS, We handle all of the connectivity between any of those downstream source systems. You won't have to worry about standing up VPNs. You won't have to worry about building out an IHE XDS.B connection to exchange these CCDs. You don't have to worry about some of these legacy integration languages that, quite frankly, are really only used on premise at the healthcare organizations today. We're going to handle all that connectivity, whether it's HL7, DICOM, FHIR, X12, could be flat files dropped to an SFTP that you're pulling from a Clarity extract overnight. We're going to handle that translation into a FHIR format, work with your teams to build out the implementation guide that works for your ecosystem and what you're trying to drive, and then get that data in real time into your cloud environment so that you can start leveraging the tools that AWS makes available so readily to actually start making sense of this data. So when you start looking at this, what this actually means is you don't just have to look at use cases that are, on a 24-hour delay, that are flat files dropped to an SFTP picked up and processed by your system. This can all occur in real time. So if you're looking to do things like capacity planning, patient throughput, discharge planning, even like case management or utilization management for patients currently admitted at your healthcare organization, Redox enables the ability for that initial admission notification to stream out into your environment, as well as the supporting clinical documentation around that. So if you want to drive, say, like discharge planning workflows for patients when they're leaving your system, you can receive that ADT AO3 event notifying of the discharge. Redox can immediately initiate a query for an encounter-based clinical summary, pull that into your system. So before that patient has even made it to their car to drive home, you've already got all of the details around their discharge, where they're ultimately going to be seen next, whether or not we need to get this patient in to see their primary care provider within 30 days to meet patient-centered medical home guidelines, as well as the supporting clinical content to know exactly what happened during that encounter, what orders were placed, what results came back in, and sharing this data with any supporting partners that you work with that help meet the treatment needs of these patients. Now, this is probably my favorite slide, because when I talk about how difficult it is to build all this and why you really don't want to find yourself in a position where you're standing up a full in-house integration team, it is all of this work that we've spent the last decade at Redox building out so that you guys don't have to. So when I call out, like, a lot of CCD exchange today is often driven by IHE profiles over an XDR connection, and these are terms that if you throw on a job listing or try to hire developers to pull these people into your ecosystem, it's really tough to find talent that can come in and start building out this infrastructure. But even once you build out one of these features, you're suddenly going to find yourself having to hire a totally different set of folks to come in and build this over and over again. And if, say, you acquire another healthcare organization that has a totally different EHR, you're starting from scratch again. So with Redox, we make this all available out of the box from our platform. We've built it so that you guys don't have to. And the connection to Redox on your end is as simple as either tapping into our JSON-based API or leveraging our FHIR-based integration. I spoke a few moments ago about what we typically see these implementation timelines look like. And I think when people start looking at real-time data in their cloud environment, there's a lot of hesitancy because these are large projects. You need a lot of resources to pull in to stand up this connectivity. You need a lot of folks working on this, and you need a lot of different areas of expertise that, quite frankly, are really difficult to find unless you've kind of built this expertise in-house. So it's not uncommon for Redox to come into an engagement where they're already 6 months, 9 months, 12 months into the implementation. They have maybe an ADT feed live, but are looking to roll this out to all their clinical feeds. And it's expensive. So when you work with Redox, we really try to shift that approach. We leverage a lot of our existing infrastructure. We have a lot of this tech already pre-built out. We've integrated with over 95 different EHR platforms. We have over 21,000 live production interface feeds, all flowing through our platform hosted on AWS. We're transacting over 1 billion transactions per month today, and that's in a bidirectional format, so both pulling data out of EHRs as well as writing back in. And the kicker for all of this is a typical implementation for Redox is still 4 to 6 weeks, and if we add right back to the EHR, we look at about 4 to 10 weeks. Now, lastly, getting started with Redox is entirely, we want to remove as much friction as possible from that. So working with Redox, there's no initial upfront fee. All pricing is driven by consumption, and the amount of volume you're actually routing through our API. So if you want to start off small, that's no problem. You can route a portion of an ADT feed, see how it's working, play around with some AWS tooling like Health Lake, Comprehend Medical, or SageMaker. Start playing around with some of the ecosystem. Get your footprint for understanding where you want to go with before activating the rest of the interface feeds and driving a lot of data throughput into your cloud environment. Now, I mentioned that I've been with Redox now for over 8 years. In that time that I've been here, we've built a massive network of connected healthcare organizations. So what you see here is a graph of the volume of connections we have today. So we're live integrated with over 6,500 healthcare organization connections. We're powering integration for over 400 applications, connected to over 95 plus EHR vendors. And that's not just, we're not counting Epic 2013, Epic 2015 as different connections. Epic counts once, Cerner counts once. We've really seen the long tail of EHRs when it comes to some of those small source systems. Integrate with over 20 regional HIEs, as well as Care Quality, eHealth Exchange. And at one point in time, we had close to 10% of all COVID testing in the United States running through our Redox API and powering a lot of those, the public health departments reporting around that front. So and lastly, we publish this entire network. So if you work at a healthcare organization and you're curious if you already have a Redox integration, you can go to explore.redoxengine.com. Every one of our connections is listed on that website. You can see what that footprint looks like. And we make it really easy to activate existing feeds, reroute that into your cloud environment. So if we're already live with you today, that implementation is cut down even further if the scope you're looking to drive in your cloud environment is already live via that connection.